In the heart of Zululand, South Africa, lies a vast game reserve known as Thula Thula. Amidst the acacia trees and savanna grass, one man forged a connection with nature so profound that it would become legendary. That man was Lawrence Anthony, a conservationist, author, and the figure now known worldwide as the Elephant Whisperer. His extraordinary bond with a herd of troubled elephants is a story that transcends borders and speaks to the deep and mysterious ties between humans and animals. The story begins in the early 2000s when Lawrence was asked to take on a challenge unlike any other. A local wildlife agency was desperate to find a new home for a group of rogue elephants. This wasn't just any herd. These elephants had earned a notorious reputation for escaping from enclosures and terrorizing local communities. They had been relocated and held in captivity several times, but wherever they were kept, they refused to stay. They had broken out multiple times, causing damage and risking not only their lives, but the lives of the people nearby. Their last escape had been so devastating that the authorities were ready to euthanize them. Lawrence had always felt a deep connection to animals, particularly those misunderstood by the world. He wasn't just a conservationist, he was a man who believed in second chances, not just for humans, but for animals too. He couldn't bear the thought of these magnificent creatures being killed because they refused to be controlled by human-made boundaries. So, despite the warnings, the risks, and the advice from friends who thought he was mad, Lawrence agreed to take the elephants in. The herd, led by a strong and intelligent matriarch named Nana, was brought to Thula Thula. Nana had endured great trauma. She had seen members of her family killed by hunters and had been captured and relocated multiple times. Every time she was enclosed, she led her herd in dramatic escapes, defying electric fences and breaking through barriers that no one thought could be breached. She had become the embodiment of defiance, and her herd followed her every lead. When the elephants arrived at Thula Thula, it was immediately clear to Lawrence that they were restless and distrustful. Nana in particular was wary. She kept her distance from Lawrence, watching him with cautious eyes. The herd stayed close together, forming a protective circle around their younger members. It was obvious that they were looking for a way out, and sure enough, that very first night, they attempted another escape. Nana led the charge, using her tusks and immense strength to push against the electric fence that surrounded the reserve. It didn't take long before she and the herd were through, marching into the night toward what they believed would be freedom. Lawrence was called in the middle of the night, and he quickly gathered his team to track the elephants down. Most people in this situation would have reinforced the fences, or worse, let the authorities take the herd away for good. But Lawrence wasn't like most people. Instead of reacting with force, he decided to try something different, something that would require patience, understanding, and a belief in the intelligence and emotional depth of the elephants. He believed that to earn their trust, he needed to speak their language. Not literally, of course, but through actions, patience, and a willingness to meet them on their terms. Over the next several weeks, Lawrence began to spend time near the elephants, sitting quietly in their presence for hours at a time. He didn't approach them too closely, nor did he try to force interaction. He simply let them get used to his presence. Every day, he spoke softly to them, telling them that they were safe now, that no one would harm them, and that they could trust him. He did this not expecting immediate results, but in the hope that over time, they would come to realize that he was not their enemy. At first, Nana and the herd kept their distance. They watched Lawrence from afar, unsure of his intentions, but slowly, very slowly, something began to shift. Nana, the ever-watchful matriarch, began to approach Lawrence, though cautiously. Her immense frame, standing over 10 feet tall at the shoulder, loomed over the small man sitting on the ground, but she never threatened him. Instead, she would stand quietly, observing him. Lawrence would sit still, his heart pounding, knowing that one wrong move could result in disaster, but trusting that Nana would sense his good intentions. The breakthrough moment came one day when Nana approached Lawrence more closely than she had ever done before. Lawrence, sensing the importance of the moment, stood up and moved to block her path. It was a bold move, one that could have ended tragically if Nana had decided to charge, but instead of reacting with aggression, Nana stopped. She stood there, just feet away from Lawrence, and the two of them locked eyes. It was a moment of understanding, a silent communication that transcended words. Lawrence later described it as a contract, a mutual agreement of trust and respect. After that day, everything changed. The elephants stopped trying to escape. They began to settle into life at Thula Thula, exploring the vast reserve and finding peace in the open spaces. Lawrence continued to visit them daily, building on the trust they had established. Nana and her herd started to see him as part of their world, and Lawrence began to understand their complex social structure, learning to read their moods and emotions. One of the most striking things Lawrence discovered was the depth of the elephants' emotional lives. Elephants, as he came to understand, are not just highly intelligent, they are deeply emotional beings. They grieve for their dead, They celebrate new life, and they have an extraordinary ability to remember both kindness and cruelty. Lawrence often spoke of the elephants as having soulful eyes that held stories of both joy and sorrow. As the years went by, Lawrence's bond with the elephants only grew stronger. He spent hours walking with them, talking to them, and observing their interactions. Nana, once a distrusting and rebellious matriarch, had become a friend, someone who welcomed Lawrence into her herd. The other elephants followed her lead, and soon Lawrence found himself surrounded by these magnificent creatures who had once been considered too dangerous to live. But Lawrence's connection to the elephants wasn't just a one-sided relationship. The elephants, too, had come to rely on him, not just for food and shelter, but for companionship. They would seek him out when they were distressed, and they seemed to sense his emotions as well. It was a relationship built on mutual respect and understanding, a relationship that transcended the usual boundaries between humans and animals. Then, in 2012, Lawrence Anthony passed away unexpectedly. His death sent shockwaves through the conservation community, but it also triggered something extraordinary at Thula Thula. 2 days after Lawrence's death, the elephants did something that no one could explain. Led by Nana, the entire herd made a long journey across the reserve to Lawrence's home. It had been over a year since they had last been near the house, but somehow they knew. They knew that the man who had saved them, who had become their friend, was gone. For 2 days, the elephants stood vigil outside Lawrence's house, quietly mourning the loss of their friend. They did not break anything, nor did they make a sound. They simply stood there, together, as if paying their respects. After 2 days, they slowly turned and made the journey back into the reserve. This incredible act of mourning left those who witnessed it in awe. How did the elephants know? How did they sense that Lawrence was gone? These questions remain unanswered, but what is clear is that the bond between Lawrence and the elephants went far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Today, Lawrence Anthony's legacy lives on through the elephants of Thula Thula. The herd continues to roam the reserve, free and wild, but always carrying with them the memory of the man who gave them a second chance. His family has carried on his conservation work, ensuring that Thula Thula remains a safe haven for wildlife. The story of Lawrence Anthony and the elephants is one of trust, redemption, and the profound connections that can form between humans and animals when we approach them with empathy and respect. It reminds us that even the wildest creatures can respond to kindness, and that sometimes the bonds we form with the animal world are as deep and meaningful as any relationship we could ever have with another human being. Lawrence's legacy is not just in the elephants he saved, but in the message he left behind, a message that speaks to the power of understanding, patience, and love in a world that often forgets the importance of all three.